warm welcome to our special report, this time from Vietnam. There's an old saying, a friend in need is a friend indeed, and this saying goes perfectly well when it comes to India giving moral and emotional support to Vietnam during those times when this nation was embargoed by many countries across the world. The cultural ties date back to centuries, the diplomatic ties are long-standing, and this partnership has now transformed into deeper economic and strategic partnership. But with the rise of China as a superpower in Southeast Asia, how do India and Vietnam hold hands? Let's take a look over the next 30 minutes. Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting his counterpart of Vietnam, Nguyen Xuan Phuc. A shake-hand long overdue, as the September 2016 meeting took place after a gap of 15 years. The visit not only came because of a louder and stronger pitch for India's Act East policy, but a larger reaffirmation of the old cultural and economic links between the two nations.
Our decision to upgrade our strategic partnership to a comprehensive strategic partnership captures the intent and path of our future cooperation.
Dating back to the 2nd century, bilateral relations between India and Vietnam have continuously got a major push. In fact, they've been governed by several areas of shared political interests. India supported Vietnam's independence from France, opposed American involvement in the Vietnam War, and supported unification of Vietnam. During the Vietnam War, India supported the North not by conducting military hostilities against the South. India and North Vietnam established official diplomatic relations in 1972 and have since maintained friendly relations, especially in wake of Vietnam's hostile relations with China.
The Prime Minister made a very important point that those who came with the message of peace to Vietnam have prevailed over those who came with the message of violence and war. Even in modern times, our fathers of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi and Ho Chi Minh, and their struggle for freedom on behalf of our peoples is what brought us together.
For Vietnam, India is like a bulwark against the dominance of any single country in the region. Hanoi has a long festering territorial dispute with Beijing in South China Sea, which has worsened since 2014. Meanwhile, Vietnam is entering a new phase in its foreign policy in the light of the visit of US President Barack Obama in May this year, with a complete lifting of US embargo on the sale of lethal weapons to Vietnam.
India and Vietnam share what you might call as the equivalent of a regional view, particularly in relation to China. Both countries have certain anxieties as far as China's own profile is concerned. And to that extent, I would not suggest that there is any kind of a military alliance, but there is definitely a certain strategic empathy.
Most of the challenges to its development and security comes from the maritime domain. So it has to focus more and more on maritime domains and prepare to cope with new type of challenges.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's recent visit to Vietnam in early September, therefore, has been seen from the perspective of renewing vigor in the foreign policy of both countries. The fact that PM chose to drop by Vietnam on his way to the G20 summit in Hangzhou has certainly been indicative of the high strategic priority which India accords to Vietnam. PM Modi's visit also came in the wake of July 12th award handed down by the Permanent Court of Arbitration in Hague on the dispute between Philippines and China. In this ruling, court rejected Beijing's 9-line claim in the South China Sea.
We also feel it necessary to further our ties on regional and international issues of common concern.
Defense and maritime security are two other key interest areas between India and Vietnam. Both the nations are fighting out the hegemony of China very subtly, not openly, because economic cooperation is the need of the hour. But with the recent ruling by the Permanent Court of Arbitration, smaller nations like Philippines, Brunei and Malaysia all seem to have come together to isolate China on the territorial claims over South China Sea. But when it comes to India and Vietnam on this particular issue of South China Sea, they both depend on each other. Since 55% of India's trade passes through the South China Sea, the Indian Navy has of late come to prioritize energy security and sea lane protection. Since 2007, Beijing has been protesting a Vietnamese Indian energy exploration project in the disputed waters of South China Sea, and there have been reports of Chinese warships confronting Indian naval vessels in the region. Ignoring Beijing's warnings, India has publicly supported Vietnam and Philippines, in particular in their disputes with Beijing, and continues to cooperate with Hanoi on hydrocarbon exploration in South China Sea. India has increased the investment on its navy, calling for the protection of the free navigation rights of Indian boats in the South China Sea zone. By strengthening relations with the surrounding countries, Prime Minister Modi has made Vietnam a major cooperation partner on the South China Sea issues. In bilateral declarations with Manila, New Delhi has acknowledged the region as part of the West Philippine Sea and has refused to endorse the Chinese discourse on the South China Sea. So India is clawing for influence just as China is. In the past, India has additionally conducted capacity building programs for Vietnamese defense personnel.
Here South China Sea question arises. We should, and we are doing, we should very clearly support the international verdict of International Court in Hague.
During Prime Minister Modi's visit, now that the two countries have decided to upgrade their relationship from a strategic partnership to a comprehensive strategic partnership, this move is seen as a new benchmark in relations between India and Vietnam. New Delhi has also extended a $500 million line of credit to Vietnam to buy defense equipment. This is above and beyond the $100 million that India had offered earlier in 2013 to Vietnam to buy defense hardware.
A new defense line of credit for Vietnam of US$ 500 million for facilitating deeper defense cooperation.
Modi government's decision to sell BrahMos missile to Vietnam underscores the evolution of India's policy towards Indo-Pacific. New Delhi at the moment seems to be ready to challenge Beijing on its own turf, and this stance is welcomed by states like Vietnam, which fear the aggression of China. A more engaged India will lead to a more stable balance of power in the region. There are numerous opportunities to increase trade between the two countries. In 2014, total bilateral trade stood at $5.6 billion. The volume of trade in the year 2016 has reached almost $8 billion, and now the two countries are expecting to take it to $15 billion by 2020. Behind me you see is the famous Saigon River. In fact, you can see so many ports which are dotting this river. It is this place from where the trading activities start, and it is this river which connects many provinces of Vietnam. And finally, this river flows into the South China Sea. Agricultural products, raw materials, leather, textile and accessories from India have a lot of potential in Vietnam. And likewise, agricultural products, electronics, white marble, stone and many other products are also exported to India from Vietnam. The Indian diaspora feels that a lot needs to be done to reach the trade target of 2020, because one of the biggest challenges at the moment is of ease of operations and trade barriers.
If we want to increase the export from India, I think we need to increase the Indians based, those are doing business in that country. We need to increase the business chamber on that country, because we are the people on the ground. If you support the activities through these chambers, I am sure business will flow.
There are close to 2,000 Indians who have settled both in Hanoi and in the southern city of Ho Chi Minh. They are mostly people who are contributing to the infrastructural growth of Vietnam. Business houses in Vietnam feel there is immense potential in the power and defense sectors, but it has not been put to maximum use.
We have chosen areas where we are comfortable, whether it's textiles or other areas. So we have our strengths over there, and people are building based on those strengths. And probably one of the biggest strengths is our skilled labor as.
India and Vietnam during recent visit of Prime Minister Modi have signed 12 agreements in a wide range of areas covering defence, IT, space, double taxation and sharing white shipping information. Apart from this, Vietnam has shown a keen interest in air and defence production. India's L&T will build offshore high-speed patrol boats for Vietnamese Coast Guards, while an agreement has also been signed on program of cooperation in UN peacekeeping matters.
Seen the 12 agreements that have been concluded, the very successful interactions the Prime Minister has had with the leadership. I think it is a reiteration of our standard position on the South China Sea issue. It's an important issue for us in view of the fact that a significant component of our trade goes through the area.
India has more than 50% of its trade that cross the South China Sea, and India also have economic interests, some projects in South China Sea. So I think we welcome all the other countries to have constructive engagement in the South China Sea.
In addition to this, MOU between Vietnamese Academy of Social Science and Indian Council of World Affairs, MOU between BIS and STAMEC for mutual recognition of standards, engagement on setting up of sustainable IT infra for advanced IT training and protocol between Vietnam and India on celebrating 2017 as a year of friendship were also signed. India and Vietnam are both members of the Mekong-Ganga cooperation created to enhance close ties between India and nations of Southeast Asia. Vietnam has supported India's bid to become a permanent member of the Security Council and join the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. India's trade relations with Vietnam have seen a continuous growth in commercial and economic engagement. In fact, India is amongst the top 10 trading partners of Vietnam. Vietnam is important for India from the connectivity angle. With the election of a civilian government in Myanmar, there are ample opportunities for closer connectivity between India and Vietnam via Myanmar and existing transit routes in Cambodia and Laos. The trilateral India-Myanmar Highland Trilateral Highway will allow Indian goods to reach Southeast Asia with ease and vice versa. In the future, the India-Myanmar Highland Trilateral Highway could link up with already existing roads like the one linking Thailand with the Vietnamese port of Da Nang.
South China Sea is concerned to India also because of this Pacific Sea. If China captures that area, then it will be a big problem for us also to do trade with other countries.
India's growing economy needs energy resources and Vietnam has rich hydrocarbon reserves. India's state-owned Oil and Natural Gas Corporation has been searching for oil in disputed waters off Vietnam, though China objected to this.
Vietnam's strategic location, right at the center of the Southeast Asian areas. This is very important. Important reason is that the policy of openness, diversification policy, foreign policy of Vietnam. We want to open for all. The same with ASEAN. ASEAN have a lot of external relations with major powers, and we want to see a balancing strategy among major powers.
The interplay of new forces in the Asia-Pacific and the resulting new geopolitical equation today demands that India and Vietnam come closer together to realize the benefits of cooperation. The strategic partnership reflects India and Vietnam's common interests, which will help to leverage the full potential of the multifaceted bonds between the two countries. And this bond develops much more because of the old civilizational and religious links. Indo-Vietnam cultural linkages are well known. Vietnam, a key strategic and economic player in Southeast Asia, is now keen to trace back its Buddhist legacy to India rather than China. Top Vietnamese monks have discovered that Buddhism in Vietnam can be traced to India like the Buddhist heritage of some of other Southeast Asian nations. Prime Minister Modi pushed Buddhism diplomacy during his recent trip to Hanoi. India announced special annual scholarships for Vietnamese students in advanced Buddhist studies at master's doctoral level and scholarships of a year for study of Sanskrit at Indian institutes for Buddhist Sangha members.
मैं भी आप सबको निमंत्रण देता हूं कि आप भी कभी भगवान बुद्ध की धरती पर आइए, बोधि वृक्ष के नीचे आप भी कुछ पल बिताइए और उस महान परंपरा का एहसास करें। मेरा आप सबको निमंत्रण है।
Advent of Buddhism from India to Vietnam and monuments of Hindu charm temples stand testimony to these bonds. RSTV crew came across several temples in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh to find out the bond between the two countries and its citizens.
You know, for Vietnam, India is a great nation. If you come back to the roots of our ties, 2,000 years ago, when the first Indian and Hindu come to Vietnam, they already make great foundation for our relation today.
This septuagenarian lady is a Vietnamese. 48 years ago, she got married to an Indian Hindu priest who was a caretaker from India. Her husband died, but she has now learnt the Hindu customs and traditions and is running the temple, also managing Indian festivals like Ganesh Chaturthi.
My husband was an Indian, so my association with Indian culture is very strong.
There are numerous temples across the cities of Vietnam, especially in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh, tracing their descent from the old Champa kingdom which came alive between 4th and 13th century. This architecture which you see behind me are actually the remnants of the old Champa civilization present mostly in the southern part of Vietnam. This was once upon a time a highly Indianized Hindu kingdom practicing a form of Shaivite Hinduism which was brought in by the sea from India. The Champa was then conquered by the Vietnamese, and today at present the Hindu Chams form the ethnic minorities of Vietnam. In sync with India's religion diplomacy, which plays a pivotal role in its foreign policy, India has offered help to Vietnam to restore the My Son temple, located 69 kilometers of Da Nang province of Vietnam. My Son temple has a striking resemblance to Indian Hindu temples during the same period. India is making all-out efforts to project itself as a champion of Hindu culture and Buddhist heritage, aimed at contesting China's projection of Buddhist heritage.
The very successful visit of Honorable Prime Minister to the Quan Su Pagoda, I think this is the best example that you can see of how a 2,000-year-old civilizational relationship between our peoples has manifested itself. Buddhism came to Vietnam from India. The Hindu Champa civilization and the monuments that remain to this day are a great example of how free flow of ideas and trade between our peoples have really established common cultural practices and traditions to this day.
Indian traces can also be seen not only in the Hindu religion but Muslims as well. RSTV crew came across this huge Indian mosque in the middle of Ho Chi Minh City. Maulanas serving the mosque for many years say that they have imbibed the culture and customs largely from India.
Cái ngôi đền này thì cũng có từ thời điểm năm 1935.
Indian community had come to Vietnam before 1935. Indian come to the mosque for praying. They even have their businesses here.
Người Muslim thường thì là họ
The old Champa kingdom not only was inhabited by Hindus but by Muslims as well. Hindu Chams dominate mostly the central province, but RSTV crew visited one of the Cham villages where Muslims reside in Ho Chi Minh. These Muslim Chams are a minuscule population. Gunny's father was an Indian who married a Vietnamese. They claim they are descendants of the old Champa kingdom. Being ethnic does not deprive them of any opportunity, and they give the credit to the Vietnam government for this.
Sống hòa hợp đúng không anh? Thì giống như thì sống trong một cái đất nước mà thì cái tôn giáo thì riêng thôi, nhưng mà cái đời sống với cách sinh hoạt thì nó giống như người Việt vậy thôi. Thì nó khác về cái tôn giáo. Nhóm ở nhiều khu, như thành phố Hồ Chí Minh, rồi bên Phan Rang không có người Chăm, rồi bên Châu Đốc An Giang thì người Chăm.
So what this man basically is saying that he belongs to the Cham community, which are the ethnic minorities of Vietnam. They are spread out in countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and a very small chunk of this population stays in this Cham village. This place which you see is actually known as the Cham village. This is the way they have identified this pocket of Vietnam. Indians residing in Vietnam for many generations say that the society is very loving and has absorbed them as their own people. Abdul has been running an Indian restaurant in Ho Chi Minh for the last 20 years and is doing good business. He says there are days when Indian dishes are highly in demand, even outstripping Vietnamese dishes.
The restaurant we feel satisfaction because we can recommend to the Vietnamese people now Indian cuisine. Then before somebody did not know well yet. So that recently now almost people they like Indian food.
There is a sense of familiarity with India that breathes on the streets of Vietnam. You would find shops like these, which are roadside shops, lined up with the Vietnamese flags. The manner in which they display their wares is so similar to what you find in India. Every 2 or 5 minutes, you will find a car which you see in India. In fact, you would also find men and women carrying their wares and selling it to the people on the cycle, with a little difference, and that's a public announcement on the cycles. Across Vietnam, the percentage of people living in extreme poverty has fallen from nearly 60% to just over 20% in the past 20 years. In 2010, the World Bank reclassified it as a middle-income country. But as Vietnam has liberalized its economy, so the number of extremely wealthy citizens has skyrocketed. Bicycles compete with Mercedes, and Range Rovers and Volts are up, dividing high-end property developments from the villages, farms and small one-room houses, doubling up as tea shops and mechanic workshops. This is another striking similarity between India and Vietnam. If you look at the history of independence of both India and Vietnam, there are striking similarities. Be it Pandit Nehru or Ho Chi Minh, they face the same trials and tribulations inside prison as well as outside. But in terms of the magnitude, I think Vietnam suffered more, because till 1944, they were under the domination of countries like France and Japan, and in 1975, they gained independence from the Americans. Both countries have been ravaged by the colonial rule, and out of sheer determination and struggle, both have come out as two emerging nations. But how can they become politically and commercially viable to each other in the Asia-Pacific region is the big question. New Delhi and Hanoi have never been so close. In fact, Vietnam has now become the linchpin of India's policy towards the East. A strong and robust relationship between these two countries is not only mutually beneficial for each other, but the power of the two can emerge as a super balancing power in Southeast Asia. That's all we could pack up in this half hour from our entire team. Goodbye and thanks for watching from Vietnam.